Hello and welcome to another sort of bonus video whereby I pick a topic and just talk about it for 5-10 minutes or so. And this time I'm going to be comparing the Legio Custodes Aquilon Terminators with pretty much all of the other Terminator range. I've got a few books beside me, so I'm going to be drawing from the rules from them and comparing the different rules and profiles and things like that with these new Terminators, because they're supposed to be the best of the best, the Emperor's personal bodyguard. They're not bothered about conquering the galaxy or the Imperium of Man or anything like that. Their primary concern is just for the Emperor himself. So without further ado, let's have a little look at their rules. What you've got there is you've got 6 Aquilon Terminators. There is one hiding in the I say hiding, he's preparing himself mentally in the Orion dropship. These 6 are armed with the twin-linked Quadratic Destructors, the Solarite Gauntlets and the Solarite Power Talons. Like the rest of the Custodian Guard army, their rules can be found in Horus Heresy Book 7, Inferno, and you'll find them under the Elites section. Now they are 225 points. Weapon skill all the way up to toughness is all 5. Great number there. They've got 2 wounds, initiative is 5, 3 attacks, leadership 9 and a save of 2+. Now if we compare that to a normal Custodian Guard squad, which again consists of 3 models, one of those squads is cheaper, it's 165 points. Again, they have the 2+ save. They do have the refractor field, which give them a 5+ invulnerable. And the only difference in their stat line is they have 1 less attack. And they're not equipped with the Aquilon Terminator armor. Now, the Aquilon Terminator armor, like the Custodian Guard armor, again, gives them a 2+ save. But instead of the refractor field, it's obviously got inbuilt power field system, so that gives them a 4+ invulnerable save. Also gives them a Hammer of Wrath special rule. They can fire heavy and salvo weapons, counting as stationary even if they've moved in the previous movement phase. They can also charge after firing rapid fire, heavy or salvo weapons. They can't make run moves, but they can still fire Overwatch and make sweeping advances. So let's just compare that to, I'd say, the most advanced sort of Terminator armor. And let's just compare the Aquilon Terminator armor to that of the Terminator armor in the Horus Heresy, the other armor. So you get your normal Terminator armor, which is your 2+ armor save and your 5+ invulnerable. The older sort of style was the Cataphracti pattern Terminator armor, which I sort of think that this is more based on, and the Cataphracti was one of the first issue tactical dreadnought armor patterns. I have an example of it right here. Hopefully that will sort of focus. So it's got these slab-like ceramite pauldrons which house additional shield generators. The side effect is overstraining the armor's exoskeleton and slowing the wearer down, and that led to the pattern's decline in use with some of the legions at the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. The Cataphracti gives you a normal 2+ save. They can't make run moves or Overwatch attacks, which obviously the Aquilon can, but they do get their 4+ invulnerable, so they can't fire the Overwatch and they can't make sweeping advances like the Aquilon, but they do get their 4+ invulnerable. So the Aquilon, you've got the added advantage of the Overwatch and sweeping advances, with the added bonus of all the rapid fire, heavy salvo, and you get the Hammer of Wrath as well. And then you compare that to the Tartarus pattern, an advanced pattern of Terminator armor which was developed late on in the Great Crusade, which was parallel with the Maximus pattern armor, was considered technological masterwork. And I have an example of it here. As you can see, it looks very much like a mini sort of Contemptor dreadnought. It's more streamlined and power efficient than the predecessors, and it's more agile. It provides short bursts of extra speed when needed, but it's also more difficult and more resource intensive to manufacture, and it became one of the most widely circulated patterns issued in the decades before the outbreak of the heresy. Obviously it's got the 2+ and then the 5+ invulnerable. Models equipped with the Tartarus armor can make sweeping advances. Again, you're foregoing the invulnerable 4+ for the sweeping advances with the Tartarus. However, with the Cataphracti, you're getting that 4+ invulnerable. So really, the Aquilon Terminator armor has the best of both worlds. It gives the bearer the normal 2+, the 4+ invulnerable, the Overwatch, sweeping advances. It takes away the negative effects from firing heavy weapons, salvo, things like that, and it also gives them Hammer of Wrath. So it really is the pinnacle in that respect of the Terminator tactical dreadnought armour. So I thought it would be important to outline the actual armour that they're in before I make any other sort of comparisons. And before I go into their specific rules and the weapons side of things, I just want to make some more comparisons with their armour compared to, you know, 40k, because I strongly believe that Aquilon Terminators do exist in the 41st millennium, and they're probably somewhere about. So I'd like to do some comparisons. That's with the standard Terminator armour. So when we do this, we then have to look at the 8th edition codex, and I'll also compare them to the Aggressors and the Centurions. So first of all, moving from right to left, your standard Terminators, similar to the Tartarus, in that you get your standard 2+ save, and you get your 5+ invulnerable. I can't really talk about movement because it's not really a thing in Horus Heresy. I can at least compare the stat line for the Terminators. So the weapon skill and ballistic skill, we could easily convert that to a 4 because it's saying 3+. The strength and toughness is 4. They do have 2 wounds though now, which they didn't have before. Terminators only ever had 1 wound. They have 2 attacks. Their leadership is 8 and their save is 2+, obviously with an invulnerable 5+. They can teleport, very much like the Aquilon Terminators. They can be equipped with teleportation transponders, so can a Legion Terminator squad. They can be deep striked in too, and the same with the combat squads. The Aggressors, similar sort of stat line, but they've now got toughness of 5. And they've still got the 2 wounds, still got the 2 attacks, but their leadership's actually worse than standard Terminator. Leadership is 7, and their save as well. When the Aggressors first came out, I was expecting like a 2+ save, maybe an invulnerable, but no, their save is the same standard as a normal power armour, mini marine or Primaris marine. It's still 3+. They sort of make up for it with the amount of firepower that they can blast out, but again, their ballistic skill is the same as Primaris, but they do have like a double you know, power fists that bump up their strength to strength 8. So they're quite shooty, and they also have the power fists, but unfortunately no invulnerable save, no 2+ save. Then that leads us on to Centurions. Again, well, if you have them as assault Centurions, then they'd be in the elite slot. But my ones are, you know, equipped with the grav cannon and grav amp, so we'll just look at him in the Devastator slot. So this is where it gets interesting, because the weapon skill and ballistic skill, we'll just convert that to 4. Their strength and toughness is 5, so it's now on par with the Aquilon Terminators for strength and toughness. They've actually got 1 more wound than the Aquilon, so they've got 3 wounds now, and I don't think they had 3 wounds before. I think they only had 2, and that's what sort of separated the Centurions from the Terminators. The fact that Centurions there were only 3 of them, but they had 2 wounds each, and Terminators only had 1. They've got 2 attacks, which I think is 1 more than they used to. Their leadership is 7, but they get a 2+ save. So already, better power output shooting wise is debatable, because now they have this thing called a Centurion missile launcher, whereas before it wasn't as good as this assault D3 strength 8 AP -2 damage D3 weapon in their chest. And also the grav amp wasn't heavy 4, it was a salvo weapon dependent on how it moved. Because they had the decimated protocols, they didn't actually count as moving, so the salvo would never affect their grav cannon. Definitely now more shooty than they ever have been, and more survivable with those 3 wounds. But again, no invulnerable save. It's just a shame they couldn't have anything, you know, sort of close combat wise, or even invulnerable save wise, to make them a clear competitor to the Aquilon Terminators. And it really depends on the situation. The standard Terminators are quite pricey at almost 200 points. Their damage output from shooting isn't the best. You know, they're equipped with their combi bolters. Typically they're equipped with combi bolters, or in the case of 40k, storm bolters, which aren't the best. And then 1 in every 5 might have a pretty decent weapon like the missile launcher, and they'll usually have a power fist, which is quite decent, albeit a bit slow. But they do have the 2+, and they do have the 5+, all of them except for the Cataphractii, which has the 4+. The Aggressors are great shooty, although close range, and they have the power fists, but they're let down by their armour. They only have the 3+, and they don't have an invulnerable. However, they do have the 2 wounds. And then finally the Centurion, which does have better armour, the 2+, but it doesn't have an invulnerable save, and it doesn't have any good close combat strength weapons. However, it can be a very shooty and survivable unit, both with the 3 wounds and with the heavy weapons that are never affected by it moving. So that brings us on to the Aquilon Terminators. They have less wounds than the Centurion at 2, so the same number of wounds as your standard Terminators and your aggressors. They have the same 2+ save as you come to expect from the Centurions and the standard Terminators, but they have the 4+ invulnerable of the Cataphracti, the only sort of Terminator type heavy unit here that has that same invulnerable save. Normally you'd get that from like a Storm Shield, although Storm Shield is 3+ invulnerable, but still. And then we come to their weapons. Their Solarite Power Gauntlets times their strength by 2, so that's a strength 10, which is insane. So better than the standard Terminators there. Better than any of these actually, with a strength 10. With AP 1 as well, don't forget. They're also master crafted. But even if we look at the Fire Pike Aquilon Terminators with the Solarite Power Talons, it's still bumping up their strength to strength 6 and giving them an AP 3, which means they're great at just ripping through standard Space Marines, especially with Shred and Master Crafted as well. So both of their close combat weapons are arguably better than anything that you see here from the standard Terminators, and actually almost rival sort of special characters or independent characters. Then we look at their ranged weapons. There's quite a few going on here. Arguably the weakest is the Infernus Fire Pike. It's a template weapon, its strength is 6, but its AP is only 6. So it's more likely going to be hitting units, hitting enemies automatically, and it's got quite a good chance of wounding them, but they're going to be able to take their saves. However, Torrent helps with that, and also if they're charged after they've teleported in, that's really going to help with their overwatch. So maybe having 1 or 2 of them equipped with the Fire Pikes might make all the difference in, say, a squad of 4 or 5. With the other ranged weapons, the Lastrum Stormbolters are sort of like your standard Stormbolters, but they're 1 better strength at strength 5, they're AP 4, they're Assault 2, but they have the heliothermic detonation rule, which basically means that if one target suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds from the weapon and they're not slain, they must make an immediate toughness test. And if they fail that toughness test, it's instant death. Again, with a penetrating hit, you add +1 to the result that's rolled. It's going to be quite difficult to get the penetrating hit with the strength 5, but still, there's the option. And finally, the most lethal out of all of them, in my opinion, is that twin-linked Adrathic Destructor. It's a short range of 12-inch death ray. It's strength 5, but it is AP 2. It's only 1-shot weapon, but it's twin-linked, so you've got a good chance of hitting. So even though it's a short-ranged weapon, it is strength 5, AP 2, Assault 1, instant death, armor bane, and gets hot. So yeah, unfortunately it gets hot, but it's twin linked anyway, so the chances of getting a double 1 is pretty slim. But also the armor bane, you know, the 2d6 plus the strength 5, you've got a decent chance of really wrecking some vehicles. So it really depends what you want to do, sort of range wise. I mean, like I said before, you can mix and match this squad, so you can have some Infernus Fire Pikes rocking with some Lastrum Stormbolters or some twin-linked Adrathic Destructors. You can have it all in one squad. Likewise, any model can replace a Solarite Power Gauntlet for a Solarite Power Talon for free. You know, there's nothing stopping you from having Lastrum Stormbolters with the Power Talons. It's really up to you, however you want to mix and match them. And obviously their usefulness is, you know, dependent on the situation at hand. I mean, if you want to go all out sort of shooty, you can't really go wrong with Centurions and Aggressors. However, your delivery method is limited only to the Repulsor tank, whereas Centurions and Terminators, you can put them in Mastodons, Storm Ravens, Thunderhawks, so on, as well as teleporting them all, well, except for the Centurion. But still, the Aquilon Terminators, although they only have 2 wounds, they've got great survivability with that toughness 5, especially with the 2+ save and the 4+ invulnerable. It gives them options in terms of firing their weapons and continuing to move. And they do pack a punch in close combat with the initiative of 5 and the buffs that they get from those close combat weapons. Are they close combat monsters? Well, I think they're a bit of both. I don't think they're especially incredible at long range. The longest range they've got is a 24-inch Lastrum Stormbolters. You want to be getting these guys as close to the enemy as possible and then wrecking face with whatever sort of gauntlets they've got. I'd probably say a good squad is 4 or maybe 5 of them. 3 they might struggle, because in theory it's only sort of 6 wounds, and you can try and bring them down through weight of fire, although their 2+ save and their toughness of 5 is going to help their survivability somewhat. So the final thing I want to leave you with is, are they the best form of Terminators, the best form of sort of elite unit? Well, that's difficult to say, because you do get things like Dreadnoughts and Centurion Assault Terminators and all kinds of things in the elite choices now. But having said that, I really do think that they are the top dog, best choice for Terminators in the Horus Heresy. They've got the flexibility of being transported around while also being deep striked with the teleportation transponders. They've also got very decent close combat weapons if it comes down to that, and their ranged weapons are good for sort of close up combat and defensive capacities. With the Ladstrom Stormbolters, if you had a squad of 3, that's 6 shots. Most likely all of them will hit and all of them will wound. And if you're going up against sort of multi-wound creatures or characters, they fail that toughness test, is instant death. Likewise with the Adrathic Destructors, Armor Bane against vehicles is pretty good. Likewise, it's instant death anyway. The only downside is you only get 1 shot, so there's only 3 shots coming through. So that might not have a huge impact on a squad of, 20 Legion Space Marines. And then you've got to weigh in how much they cost points-wise. They are expensive points-wise. Losing one of them will set you back 75 points. And that's quite a big chunk, even if you are playing a 2,000 point game. You lose a squad all 3, with all their upgrades and stuff, and that's almost 10% of your force if you're playing a 2,000 point game. So with these, like the rest of the Custodian force, you've really got to pick your battles and choose the right times in the battle to deploy them, and where best to effectively use their strengths, and make sure your opponent doesn't take advantage of their weaknesses. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about the Custodian Guard and the strategy or the rules and things for the new Aquilon Terminators. I did think that they deserved a video of their own, being sort of the biggest, baddest sort of Terminators out there now. Custodian Guard are scary enough with 2 wounds and a 2+ save and a 5+ invulnerable, and their scary sort of Guardian Spears with their sort of AP3 or AP2 and lightning blows, and their Guardian Bolters for that matter too. They're scary enough models, but to have them in Terminator armour and to get that 4+ invulnerable and have them teleport and have them have the death rays that the sort of Sagittarium have, yeah, they're pretty intimidating units, and I really can't wait to have them all around the Emperor at some point whenever Forge World release that model. Anyway, thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor protects.